Hello everyone, it's Michelle Upton here and welcome to the first card for Case Me a Christmas card this year. You might notice a little bit of a difference. Usually I do a series of challenges leading up to Christmas time and I call them Challenge Me a Christmas card. This year, instead of my guests and I challenging each other to make a particular style or use a particular technique, this year I've asked my guests to case one of my cards and I'm going to case one of theirs. So my very first guest for this year is the amazing Ardyth. You probably know her from her blog Masquerade, and she has just an amazing clean and simple style that I adore. So the card that I'm casing of hers today, she used a background stamp and she coloured it with Copic markers and then embossed over the top. So I'm using a similar design, not the same stamp. This stamp is the Flora background stamp from Simon Says Stamp, but it's a similar kind of thing. And I'm actually going to emboss with it first because I'm not going to be using Copic markers. So one thing I always like to try to do when I'm casing somebody else's card, case stands for copy and share everything, is I try to take some inspiration from somebody's card, but not to make a direct copy. So I might use a different technique, or I might use different products, or I might just take one idea from the card and just run with it. So for this card, I'm actually making two cards with a similar technique, but not exactly the same. So this card, I have embossed the Flora background stamp with some silver embossing powder. This particular embossing powder is from a company that sadly is no longer with us. It was called Ardyth Stamps, an Australian company. And I then added some nuance powders. You could see me tapping those nuance powders over the top. They're watercolour powders, very, very pigmented powders. And then I've just sprayed over the top with just tap water, nothing special. They're just in a spray bottle. I'm just adding a little bit more powder here and there around the edges where I didn't quite get enough of the colour. And spraying again to spread that colour around. Now, I am very, very impatient when it comes to card making, so I grabbed my heat tool to dry this off, and I'm actually blotting off a little bit of the colour. Ardyth's card was really nice and soft colours, and I decided that I had just a little bit too much colour on this one. But I finished drying that one off, and then I decided I want to try a different technique and see if I can get a similar looking result. So I'm doing exactly the same as I did before. I am stamping with the Flora background with Versamark. I made sure that I used my anti-static powder tool to start with. This time I'm actually using some silver embossing powder from Wow Embossing. And the results were very similar. The one from RT was ever so slightly more shiny, and this one it's still shiny, but not quite as shiny as the other one. But this time, I decided to take some zig markers. You can see I've chosen my favourite blues here. And what I'm aiming to do here is get a slightly more intentional colour placement. With the nuance powders, I just randomly shook the powders all over the place and just got random blues all over the place. But with this card, I'm taking my zig markers and actually following the design of this stamp. One reason I use this stamp in particular, I have a lot of beautiful background stamps from Simon Says Stamp, but this one actually follows a hexagonal pattern. So to me, it reminds me a bit of a snowflake. So that's why I decided to use it on some Christmas cards. All right, and I did the same thing, dried it with my heat tool, and you can see the different results I'm getting here between the two backgrounds. So much more intentional placement of colour on the left and a little bit more random on the right. Now what I'm doing now is I'm spraying with some Perfect Pearls that I've mixed with water. The reason I was doing a really weird action is because the spray bottle, the actual plunger on the spray bottle is a bit broken, so every time I press it down I have to pull it back up again. It still works, just not very well. So yeah, I sprayed over with some Perfect Pearls because of course you need some shimmer on a Christmas card, especially one that is looking a little bit like a snowflake. So I decided to use different sentiments on these two cards. So I'm using some die sentiments. One of them is from Paper Rose. So the Merry Christmas is from Paper Rose, and the Joy is from Birch Press. And I decided that the Joy I would cut out of some blue cardstock. This blue cardstock, one of my crafty friends, Esther, sent some to me because it's the perfect Michelle blue. Absolutely adore this cardstock. So thank you so much, Esther. And the other one I cut from some mirror cardstock, some silver mirror cardstock. For the Merry Christmas. But both of them I matted on some white for the shadow layer of the die, just so that it was it showed up a lot better and didn't sort of blend into the background, especially because the background has all that silver embossing. I thought it needed the shadow behind it just to make the sentiment stand out a little bit more distinctly. So I'm just using my liquid glue. This is Ginny-K Connect glue that I'm using today, and adding that to the background, and I'm going to pop that into the middle of the card. Now, one trick that I do with the dots on top of the eye is I just leave that in the piece that I've cut it from, add some glue on the back, and then line it up on top of the rest of the word to get the placement just right. So I'm using these crisp Christmas sentiments, which are printed sentiments from Paper Rose. And this is the first time I've actually used them, so brand new sheets here. And what I like to do with these sentiments is I keep them in a little plastic bag so that they're all together, and when I have cut some down, I can sometimes just go in and grab one without having to cut it down. But what I do find is that the edge of it, because it's printed, it's black printed onto white paper, the edge of it, you need to go around with a black marker. So that's what I'm doing now. I've got my memento marker here. I'm just using the edge of the marker to go around the edges so it looks clean. I decided that on my card fronts, I wanted a little bit of a white border, so I'm just going around the edges and cutting off the edges. I could have just cut off double this width off each, like off one side and then off 90 degrees of that, but because I'd already centered the image on the card, I really wanted to make sure that image was still centered, so I took a little bit off every single edge. So I'm just lining that up using my tape runner to adhere that to the card front, and then I'm going to just pop that onto my white card base. This is Nina Solar White card that I always use for my card bases. I use the 110 pound for card bases because it just stands up so much better. And I couldn't resist adding a little bit of Wink of Stella to the blue Joy on this particular card. Now, with this one, I decided that I wanted the black sentiment strip to go on the card in between the Merry and the Christmas, but it was just covering up a little bit too much of the Merry and the Christmas and making it a little bit hard to read. So what I've done is I've cut the Merry Christmas apart, and I'm going to layer the black sentiment strip over the top to actually cover the gap that I'm leaving between them. So when I show you, you'll see on the back of it when I actually adhere them together that there is a bit of a gap of, maybe half a centimetre or so. But yeah, I tried to make sure I covered that up properly with the sentiment strip, and that just gave me a little bit better placement, I thought. Now, I actually cut out quite a bit from this video because I just faffed around for so long with this sentiment. I couldn't get it straight. And yeah, I tried over and over again. So you probably thank me for, if you knew how long it actually took me to get this sentiment straight in the end. And even after this point, I even went back and pulled it off and tried again because I didn't think it was straight enough. So it did take a while. So yeah, I might try it a different way next time. I don't know. All right, the joy went on a lot more quickly, so I just used some liquid glue for that and added the little to you and yours sentiment off to the right of that. So I think I did an okay job of casing Ardyth's card. It's not the same layout because her card was square. It's not the same technique because I didn't use Copic markers, but you can see there's plenty of shine from the embossing and also from the perfect pearls that I added. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you back again next time. Bye!